Okay, hey, we are back and apologize for a little bit of a delay, but welcome everyone to the May 17th, 2021 regular meeting of council. And we have already started the meeting and just came out of executive session. And one of my favorite things, and I see that I've got Susan and Gary, and do I have, all right, trying to see if there's anyone else on my list. All right, so Susan and Gary and Judy, am I missing anybody else that's in the meeting that's getting sworn in?
John Fleming was unable to make it tonight. I haven't heard from Kathy Roma. And
okay.
Kathy Roma is directing a rehearsal right now of the World House Choir.
Oh, great. All right. Well, this will make it easier because Gary and Susan are being sworn in for the same commission. And so I'm going to stand, and Gary and Susan, I'll leave it up to you what you do. And all right. So let's see. We'll back up here. And so Gary and Susan, I'm going to have you mic on and repeat after me. I solemnly affirm. Oh, I think we've got a mic, Gary and Susan on.
I think I'm on now. Am I?
It's on, and Susan.
I am too.
Okay, so
okay.
Again, I solemnly affirm.
I solemnly affirm.
I solemnly affirm
That I will support the Constitution.
That I will
support the Constitution.
And will obey the laws of the United States.
And will obey the laws of the United States.
And of the state of Ohio.
And of the state of Ohio.
And I will in all respects.
And I will
in all respects.
Observe the provisions of the Charter.
Observe the provisions of the Charter.
And the ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs.
And the ordinances
of the Village of Yellow Springs.
And will faithfully discharge the duties of.
And will faithfully discharge the duties of.
The office of the Planning Commission.
The office of
the Planning Commission.
All right. So you are officially sworn in, and we appreciate you. I've actually got village pins for both of you that I will find later on to make you super official. Susan and Gary, thanks for your service. Planning Commission, one of the commissions that is so important for the village, as I think you both are aware. So we appreciate your service.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Okay, so next up, we are talking about announcements. So do we have any announcements?
I have two announcements, Brian.
All right, Josue, go for it.
All right, the first one, last week we announced that we were going to host our own vaccine clinic, and we've got the details of that, and I'm going to put it up on the screen as soon as my screen cooperates with me here. And so the details are June 2nd, between 8:30 and 11:30, we will have our own COVID vaccine clinic. So walk-ins are welcome. It's going to be right here at the John Bryan Center in the gym. So folks will have another opportunity on June 2nd, the day of the governor's orders expiring, to get a vaccine. The second announcement that I have, I'm happy to report that the Miami Township and the village government are cooperating on a partnership to continue our oil recycling program. We can't do it here at the John Bryan Center because of the risk to our water protection area in the Glen Helen, but we're exploring a partnership with Miami Township of having it either at the fire station or at their barn. So we hope to be able to make that happen. But May 21st will be the last day of oil recycling here at the John Bryan Center.
All right, thank you, Josue. Do we have any other announcements?
I'd just like to announce that May is Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month.
Thanks, Laura. And I was going to say, I appreciated your support on the resolution that we're going to read. And if you are interested in reading that in yourself, let me know. Any other announcements?
I have one. I would like to let anyone who's interested in singing again know that the Yellow Springs very own World House Choir has resumed rehearsals. And it's anyone can come and sing. You don't have to be a trained musician. You don't have to read music. We're rehearsing, or I should say they are, because it's on Monday nights at 7 o'clock at Agraria. And so they're singing in the barn, distanced and with masks on. So if anybody's interested in joining the World House Choir, Monday nights, 7 p.m., Agraria.
All right, excellent. Johnny Burns, is your hand up because you have an announcement? All right, go for it. Oh, we got let's see. I can probably do that. All right, there you go, Johnny.
Hey, I just want to let everybody know Dog Park grand opening for the groundbreaking tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
Yes.
Up by the water towers.
Yes. Be there or get barked at.
Exactly.
All right. Brian Carlson, is your hand up for an announcement as well?
Yes, sir. Just real quick. So this Friday morning, the police department's going to assist the Mills Lawn, I believe, 5th grade on the 3rd bike hike. And next week, the 26th at 6 p.m., the 6th grade graduation parade will start at the high school and proceed to Mills Lawn. We'll be assisting with that, of course. And then on the 27th at 8 p.m., it'll be leaving at 8:15, will be the vehicle procession for the high school graduation.
Thanks for supporting those activities. And, you know, that 6th grade clap out is always one of my favorite things. Unfortunate that we're still having to be distanced for the high school graduation, but I know that they're all excited. Any other announcements?
Yes, Brian.
Yeah, Kevin.
Just want to keep in the forefront of people's mind that there will be a Juneteenth celebration. We're still in the planning phases. We'll share more details when everything gets nailed down, but it will be Saturday, June 19th. Right now, we're tentatively looking at Gaunt Park as the location, but again, we're still negotiating with some of the logistics in that regard. So just want to just keep that again in the forefront of people's mind that we look forward to having a community-wide Juneteenth celebration on Saturday, June 19th. More information to come.
All right. And Kevin, thank you for taking leadership on that. I know that, you know, Mary Ann had highlighted when we made it a paid holiday that we should, you know, definitely celebrate it in proper ways. So that is great. And I appreciate all the collaboration.
Great.
Anything else? All right. Of course, I have a few. First of all, I wanted to thank the YS Tree Committee for mulching the trees along the bike path. And I was planning to be there. Unfortunately, I did a little bit too much biking on Friday, so didn't make it. But I know that that went well, and I appreciate that the village also supported that activity. I also wanted to recognize, sadly, the passing of Kingsley, who was a great presence when he worked with the village at the youth center. I remember that Kingsley was always so calm and kind in like problem solving, and I just wanted to recognize his great spirit. I also wanted to give a shout out to Denise Swinger, our planning and zoning coordinator. And I don't know, I know that internally we see the amazing work that she does, but I've just got to say, Denise, you're blowing us away. I am so impressed with just how on top of things you are, and you know, continuing to be open to taking on all the challenges that this village has to offer. So we appreciate you. And the last thing I want to mention is and I think it's going to come up in other parts of the agenda, but I really want to figure out how we get better connected with our local business community, because I am constantly getting a variety of different feedback about, is the village being helpful or not being helpful? An example recently was one member of Village Artisans who said, like, business has been better than ever. And then in the same day, another individual that said, like, the village is not like helping us and is not, supporting our business. So I don't know exactly how we resolve that, but I think, we can all recognize that we can continually improve our communications. And so I just want to put out there that I believe council and the village are authentically wanting to better connect and understand, like, how we do things that are going to help support our business while keeping our community safe, our local businesses while keeping our community safe. So I'm putting that out there. I put that out there at the chamber meeting as well. And I've seen lots of great letters from our business community. Marsha Walgren brought up a great point about directing people to parking. And so we want to do whatever we can to continue to have a vibrant, resilient community. And so this is just a genuine call out to help us make sure that we're doing things that support everyone. So with that, we're going to move to the consent agenda, and these are the minutes from our last meeting, and I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Okay. All right. And Judy, if you could call the roll, please.
Yes. McQueen.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Curlis.
Sorry, yes.
Ouch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next up is our review of the agenda. So this is where we talk about anything that needs to be added, revised, or removed from the agenda. So do we have anything that we need to review?
I would like to add an item to the agenda. I submitted in memo form for publication a reading on emergency ordinance 2021. I don't know, I guess would be 21, amending ordinance 660.16, amending 2020-13 and repealing 2020-12.
So you want to add this to legislation?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting, we have normally not added legislation when we've reviewed the agenda. All right, I'm gonna allow it and then we'll see what happens when we get there. So that's 2020-13?
It would be reading on emergency ordinance 2021-21, amending 660.16 and repeating.
Okay, so we're talking about a new piece of legislation that has not been...
I submitted the legislation with a memo in the packet on Friday.
Yeah, I saw
it's
that.
on page 108 of the packet.
I just didn't realize that we were... So Brianne, can we add a piece of legislation that hasn't been noticed?
Based on whether there is or is not an emergency, you can, but I believe council would want to have the discussion as far as whether it's necessary, given that those ordinances will expire based on the village's own emergency declaration expiring concurrent with the state's state of emergency. So as far as whether it is necessary to repeal any existing legislation, I think council needs to have that discussion, but I don't know that legislation as necessary to be added at this point.
Yeah, I didn't realize that the initial request was to add legislation. I don't feel comfortable with that. I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a procedure to like vote against that, but we do have on new business discussing changes in our COVID policy. So I don't feel comfortable with adding legislation that has not been publicly announced. So I don't know. I'm open to, like, I guess a motion or something to be overruled on that.
Well, I move we add it to the agenda.
All right, is there a second? Okay, any other agenda review items?
Brian,
Yes.
There was a request from Carmen Brown for funding, and I didn't know whether we, for Juneteenth. I didn't know whether you would want to address that at this meeting.
She's pulled that. I sent an email out.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, if not, then Marianne, I think you are up with petitions and communications.
A number of the communications actually came in for our last meeting, but didn't get into the packet. So I'm going to read just the author of these that were in opposition to the DORA proposed legislation. Marsha Walgren, Carolyn Qualls, Will Cook, Rebecca Cooter, Chris Wyatt, Pan Rich, Leslie Lippert, Joe Cook, John Hudson, Ellen Hoover, Bette Kelly, Rick Donahoe, Donna Caslin, Matt Ruska, Liz Porter, Carol Cottam, Lindsay Burke. Judith Hempfling also sent in something about against DORA. Then Matt Ruska also had in his communications some concern about our exclusive zoning. Ellis Jacobs had legislation opposing some of the issues around transit guest lodging, as did Jessica Thomas. Laura Curlis had information from ODOT regarding traffic light on South 68 at the intersection with 235.
No, it's a traffic circle.
Oh, a traffic circle.
They're going to build a traffic circle.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I wasn't clear about that. The county sent out information about Motorcycle Safety Month for May. There was a report from the mayor's clerk of court. The county health department sent out information about change in venues for COVID vaccine. Laura Curlis sent out a great deal of information. I guess it was all from you, Laura, from the CDC guidance on masking. Kate Hamilton had a communication about COVID. Greene County had a situation report about COVID. Then there were some communications about masks, including Dr. Carrie Smith, Maria Whitaker, Brittany Baum. There was also something in the packet about commuter taxes from the Columbus Dispatch. I think that was all.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. All right, so we're going to move into legislation. And first up, we have an emergency reading of 2021-10. And Judy, let's do that by title only.
All right, this is repealing Section 304 paid holidays of the Village of Yellow Springs Personnel Policy Manual and enacting a new Section 304 paid holidays, thereby amending the Personnel Policy Manual and declaring an emergency.
All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to open the public hearing. So this is an emergency reading. And Judy, can you begin by explaining why we're doing it as an emergency?
This is being read as an emergency so that it will take effect before the Juneteenth holiday. The holiday that's being added is in fact Juneteenth, which is June 19th. So if it's not read as an emergency, it wouldn't go into effect in time.
Okay, thanks, Judy.
Yeah,
Jose?
If I may add context, I know previously through my manager's report, I've been reporting on updates on the personnel manual. We had hoped to wrap this change up along with the personnel manual. We have done some changes to the personnel manual, but we feel it would be premature to bring it to council now and get the Juneteenth holiday done through the personnel manual because we are soliciting feedback from the employees. There are changes that we are proposing to, one, bring us to compliance with the personnel manual, but also shore up or tie up some loose ends around some liabilities that we have through our personnel manual. So we want to get feedback from the employees before bringing that back to council.
Okay. So yeah, I think that clarifies that the reason why we're doing this is because the employee handbook updates are not, fully ready. And so we do want to make sure that we recognize Juneteenth in 2021. So are there any questions or comments? All right, if not, I'm going to close the public hearing. And Judy, if you can call the roll, please.
Yes. Curlis.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Resolution 2021-19. And Judy, we can read that in by title only.
Yes, this is authorizing the village manager to enter into an agreement with Gray's Tree Experts for 2021 utility line clearance, Section 4 of the village.
All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Josue?
Thank you, Brian. This is Johnny and I on this. As you know, every year we issue a contract to do power line clearing. This is an important element to maintaining power to all of our residents and businesses. It's been a key element of our strategy to reduce the downtime on power outages. And it's also been one of the factors that has allow our electric department to repeatedly receive awards for public safety and low downtime on powered outages. Johnny, do you want to get into the details?
Yeah, this is for Section 4 of the power lines. And as you know, that we have been going above and beyond and taking it down below the communication lines. We put it out for bid. We received 2 bids and Gray's come in the lowest.
Okay. So I believe, Mike, are you on this call because you wanted to comment?
No, Mike is our AMP representative.
Oh, okay.
He's here to present. I did send out the link to Derek from Arbor Care, who was the contractor that lost the bid, and he had an opinion or thoughts about losing the bid, and he wanted to voice those to council. I've shared the link with him a few minutes ago. Okay. Johnny, I copied you on that email. So he asked a few minutes prior to this meeting. So if we would have asked ahead of time, we would have made sure that he'd gotten it. So I don't know if he's going to be joining us.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, if not, Judy, if you can call the roll, please.
Yes, McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Thank you. Curlis.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last piece of legislation is Resolution 2021-20. And Laura, did you want to read this in?
Sure. This is a resolution condemning anti-Asian and Asian American harassment and violence in the United States. and I'm going to read it in its entirety. Whereas since the COVID-19 pandemic began, news in the United States, hate speech and violence against Asian American Pacific Islands persons has increased, with more than 40% of U.S. adults believing, quote, it has become more common for people to express racist views toward Asians since the pandemic began. And whereas nearly 3,800 racist incidents against the AAPI community were reported in the last year, according to Stop AAPI Hate and the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism, found that anti-Asian American hate crimes reported to police rose 149% between 2019 and 2020, and thousands more events were not reported to the police. And whereas, unfortunately, racism against the AAPI community in the U.S. is not a new phenomenon, having begun with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and continued with the Rock Springs Massacre in 1885, the incarceration of Japanese immigrants and Japanese Americans during World War II, and the murder of Vincent Chin in 1982. And whereas in the wake of a wave of recent violent incidents, including the targeting of several Asian-owned businesses and the murder of 6 Asian women and 2 others in March 16 in Atlanta, Georgia, Council for the Village of Yellow Springs stands with the members of the AAPI community in their shock, sadness, and horror at what appears to be part of a larger national pattern of intentional violence against Asians and Asian Americans. And whereas we condemn in the strongest terms this loss of life and mourn for survivors, victims, and their families of any and all anti-Asian harassment and violent episodes, in line with our village values to continue intentionally to promote anti-racism, inclusion, equity, and accessibility through all policies, procedures, and processes. And whereas the Village of Yellow Springs will continue to work to make our community open and safe for members of the AAPI community, actioning our village to be a welcoming community of opportunity for all persons, regardless of race, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, ethnicity, economic status, mental, physical ability, or religious affiliation. And now, therefore, be it resolved that 1, Village Council hereby expresses support and will actively advocate for our villagers who are members of the AAPI community. And 2, Council for the Village of Yellow Springs hereby condemns all form of anti-Asian and Asian American harassment and violence and stands in support of AAPI residents, visitors, and friends of the Yellow Springs community.
All right, thank you, Laura. Can I get a motion?
I would like to so move.
Second.
Okay. I know that Migiwa is on the call to say something, and so we're gonna get her on mic. And so Migiwa, yeah.
Hey, thank you. My name is Migiwa Orimo. I have lived in Yellow Springs for almost 40 years, and this is the first time in my memory in Yellow Springs that members of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community in Yellow Springs are speaking up on our own behalf. And this is happening all over the country. And a few weeks ago, I attended a rally at the state capitol in Columbus, and just yesterday, another rally in Cincinnati. There's a sense of urgency to address the hate crimes against AAPI individuals. So I really appreciate you would show your support and advocacy for the villagers by passing this resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Migiwa. Appreciate those comments. Any other comments? Well, I mean, I think most people know that I spent 12 years abroad in Asia, and you know, all of my graduate experience were with Asian Americans, and they've just contributed so much to our local, state, and national communities. This is really sad. So with that, Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Yes. Krieger.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Curlis.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank Angie Sue, who was someone who brought this forward at our last meeting. And again, I appreciate Laura's support on helping to bring this resolution forward. Okay, we are now moving into citizen concerns. This is the point on the agenda where we welcome any comments that are about items that are not on the agenda. We ask that you limit those comments to 3 minutes, and Judy Kittner will be keeping time just so that we can stay on schedule with our meeting. So do we have any citizen concerns? I see that. All right, so I've got Judith. You know, Judith, you are, your picture is sideways, so, but you still look great. So Judith, I'm gonna have you mic on first, and then Megan, I see your hand. Oh, there you go. All right. And Megan, you'll be up next. So Judith, I think you should be able to mic on now. There you go.
Okay. Hi, you guys. Well, first I want to say I watched the meeting last time and I just think your process is excellent. So I just want to say that. I mean, there's good give and take. People have differing opinions. They debate them respectfully. You don't see it every day, so it's great. But I'm bringing just a personal concern or a concern of my street, people in my street, which is regarding the sidewalk that's being put in along Limestone in front of our homes. There are 8 households that are directly affected. We all support the sidewalk. That's not the question. We feel like the village needs to have more effective communication when you have a project that is directly affecting, you know, what's a handful of households that we should be we should have been communicated with early on in the process, directly, personally. It's not enough to send a letter saying, you know, there's going to be a sidewalk and, you know, surveyors will be coming around surveying, which I think that letter, some of my neighbors remembered the letter. There's 8 households. I talked to 6 of those 8 households. Everybody, all of them are saying, you know, we thought we would be contacted. We thought we would be told how this is going to impact us, when it's going to happen, and would have maybe some input to make it more not quite as disruptive, you know, for us, having what is a necessary thing to have be put in the sidewalk. My house is probably the house that sits closest to the street along here, and I've got a lot of green screening, and I was assuming the sidewalk, you know, I didn't feel like I needed to go to a meeting about it, a village-wide meeting about it, although quite honestly, I wasn't even aware of it because people get caught up with their own personal, you know, issues. People have sick relatives, et cetera, and so they're not paying such close attention necessarily to what the village is doing. Anyway, my concerns escalated quite a bit last week when 2 things happened. One, I realized they're moving the electric pole at the corner of my lot out close to the street. So they're going to have to bring the sidewalk in quite a bit closer. And I realized probably, although Johnny's going to go over it with me tomorrow, it looks like all of my green shrubs to kind of, you know, it's a busy street. It gives you a little more sense of privacy. Looks like they're going to have to be taken out the way the village is planning to do this. And it seems utterly unnecessary. It looks like trees may be taken out. I don't actually know. I assumed I was losing parking. One should never make assumptions, but that looked like the practical way to do it. And now it looks like I'm not only losing parking, but I'm losing shrubbery. I'm losing potentially trees. My neighbors also have similar concerns. And I think before you even, when the next time you do a project like this, before you even do the drawings, you should be thinking about how to do what's an important community project without really, with minimal disruption to those, you know, near at hand. just because it's in the right of way, you know how it is. People start to feel like it's part of their yard. They make plantings, you know, they do work to make it look nice. They put money into it potentially, and they become attached to those things. And so the second issue is the light that was put across the street from me, which is like a spotlight going into my living room now. And if the shrubbery gets taken out, it's going to be even worse. And I would like to think the village is thinking about light pollution and will be willing to make some adjustments as they have done for other people in town so that I don't have this spotlight, you know, pouring into my living room windows, which are quite large. It's the whole side of my house basically is windows. So those are my concerns.
All right.
You know, a little more time on the communication side would make for a much better, a much more of a sense of feeling that the village is here to serve the community versus just get a lot of projects done that without taking the time to really talk to those who are most directly affected in a way that could make it good for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. And I think rather than comment right now, I'll say that we appreciate that feedback and we will do some follow-up about our communication process on this project. I appreciate that that Johnny is going to be walking the property with you, and I think that we will kind of regroup and think about some of the ways that we can respond to some of those thoughts. So and Josue, I know that this is something that you're actively interested in, so we'll come back on this one.
And
okay.
John, I just want to say the other neighbors are all hoping to be hearing from the village also. You know, so they asked me to get back to them, but it would also be good for the village to get in contact with them.
Okay, we'll follow up on that.
We'll follow up, Judith. Thank you. I appreciate you reaching out to us. And I'm sorry you couldn't make it to our town hall when we discussed the design of the path and whatnot, but we'll reach out to you and the neighbors.
All right, thank you.
All right, Megan Bachman.
Thank you so much, Brian. Just a couple of comments. One, I understand that I understand why Laura's motions weren't seconded, but I do think it's really important that the community gets some kind of signal, as well as businesses, visitors from the village, what's going on with the mask mandate in Yellow Springs. I feel like waiting until June 2nd when the state of Ohio's emergency is lifted is not, it's not going to be helpful. So I really hope that council, even if there's no legislation passed, that there's some real clear information that's put out about what Yellow Springs is going to do. And secondly, I just want to once again argue for return to in-person meetings. I do think it is more accessible. I know that some village leaders don't agree with me on that, but I think that in these times, communication is so important for all these issues. I think we need to come back together in person to hash out some difficult problems. I think we all know the issues with having conversations on Facebook in this community. I think we need to get back in person. I want to see council consider that sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Okay, and on the latter issue, that actually is on the agenda, and so we will be discussing it. And on the former issue, I expect that you're gonna get some kind of signal as well. Okay, any other citizen concerns? All right, thank you everyone. We are now gonna move into special reports. And yeah, this is again why Mike is involved in this meeting. So I know that we're going to give an update on our American Municipal Power portfolio and some of the things that we need to think about moving forward. I don't know if Josue or Johnny are gonna lead into this and then hand it over to Mike. So I'll let you guys take it over.
All right, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. Mike is our representative from the AMP. Mike leads our power supply strategy, and as has been custom for the administration to bring AMP every year to talk about power supply and talk about opportunities that are ahead of us. You've heard from me report that we have 2 energy contracts that are expiring. Part of Mike's presentation is introduced 2 very competitive and viable options. They're very competitive. Today, I'm not making a recommendation to council. We would like the opportunity to come back with a recommendation to council and with other opportunities. But what Mike has to present today is a really great options. Mike, will you be sharing your presentation, or you want me to load it on my screen and share it?
I can share it.
All right, so we've given you co-host permission, so you can share your screen.
All right. Okay. Yeah, so I'm Mike McLaurin, Vice President of Power Supply Planning, and we're going to go over Yellow Springs Power Portfolio, and as Josue mentioned, talk about a couple options that, we're not asking for any action today. We're still negotiating with those, but just introduce you to some of the recommendations for the future that you'll see here. First thing we do is look at, the amount of energy that the village uses, just like, at your house, the meter spinning. In 2020, the village used 36,258 megawatt hours, which is 36 million kilowatt hours. So that's varied. The highest last couple of years has been 2019, over 38,000. And this year our forecast is for 36,508, little less than summer. We had one of the hotter summers last July, and you can see that, usually July is when the village, like most AMP members, uses the most amount of energy there. Second thing then is just the peak hour for the year. In 2020, that was on July 9th at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The village was using 7.99 megawatts, which is 8,000 kW, a little less than the last 2 years. And you also notice that the village's peak has gone down pretty considerably since the end of the 20th century there. We hit 11 megawatts back in 1999. That was close to 100 degrees that day or that year. But also the village was getting close to the capacity of its distribution line from Dayton Power and Light. So it was possible that we'd have to take some, actions to build a new line to serve that high peak. And the village was able, through conservation efforts, to keep that peak down and reduce it down to 8 megawatts where we are today. So we talk about your, your power bill. That's really made up of 3 charges. One is the energy, kilowatt hours that we consume. That makes up about 75% of your cost. And then the transmission cost is about 10% or so. That's paying Dayton Power and Light to deliver the energy to the village. And then finally, last 15% is made up of installed capacity. That's sort of backup capacity, where that's contributing to the payments that are made to generators to be available on call during an emergency. So that makes up 15% of the charges. And we'll talk about all three of those. First, we're going to go through your power sources. So this is what we look like in 2021. It's a nice, colorful wheels, so diverse portfolio. And a couple of things to point out is, about 78% of the power is under contract through renewable resources. All these resources that we have under contract are from renewable, being solar, wind, landfill, and hydro. And then we have about 22% of our power on the market. But as Josue mentioned, the EDI landfill contract ends at the end of this year, and then the Blue Creek wind contract ends in the middle of 2022. So we were looking down the road to replace those with renewable resources, but at the same time, low cost or reasonably cost renewable resources, not paying an additional amount just to call those renewable. So right now, once those EDI and Blue Creek expire, we are expecting a little more output from the hydros next year. So will be at about 35% market, and that'll drop our renewable percentage down to 65% before we come up with any replacement resources. So it's a quick review of what you have in place. This Brown County is the newest resource that the village contracted for about 2 or 3 years ago. And that comes from a landfill down in southern Ohio, Brown County. And just like EDI, the EDI landfill, EDI, which is energy development, they buy the methane gas from the landfill. EDI owns the generators, and they sell the power to AMP through what we call a PPA, or a power purchase agreement there. So that contract is in place through 2032. You can see the rates are about 3.5 to 4 cents there for the next 5 years. Then we have our oldest resource, which is NYPA, which is New York Power Authority. That's hydropower from 2 projects up in the Niagara project down from Niagara Falls, and then on the St. Lawrence River. That project, we started getting power about 1985 or so, and the license has been extended a few times. The latest extension goes through 2032. And because that project is all debt-free, it's about a $20 rate there, about 2 cents. So that's our best rate. That it covers about 5% of your energy. And then the second amount of hydro is from AMP's 3 different hydro projects. So we have the Meldal project, Greene project, and then the AMP hydro project is made up of Smithland, Campbellton, and Willow Island. All 5 of these hydro plants are on the Ohio River. Greene was built in 1982, sold by Hamilton to AMP when we started the projects. And then the other 4 were started construction back in 2008 or so, and they came online in 2016 and 2017. And the way these hydro plants operate, it's a little different than, we think of the hydro as being the Hoover Dam out in Las Vegas or Nevada. And in that case, we have a large reservoir, and we have a large vertical drop between the top of the dam and the bottom of the dam. In this case, these plants on the Ohio River, we call them run of the river. So really we're subject to the characteristics of the river. And the Army Corps of Engineers operates the dams, and their main concern is, to control flooding, and also to keep the river at adequate levels so the barges can get up and down the river. So these dams have been in place since the 50s and 60s. What AMP does is then we went in and built our plants next to the dam. And so normally, on a normal operation, the gates in the dams are closed, and then all the water is flowing through our hydro plant. The big difference between our plants and the Hoover Dam is that we only have about a 20 to 25 foot drop between what we call the upper pool, the top of the dam, and then the water in the lower pool. So on average, we get about 60% of the output throughout the year from these plants. And the reason we don't get that last 40% is either low water or high water. So low water is a little easier to understand. So that typically is in the fall, when the Corps is trying to keep the water upstream. And so they tell AMP, back off some of the water flowing through the hydro plants, and that reduces our output. We're still usually generating at that time. The other one that reduces our output is during high water conditions. And so in high water, which is normally late winter, spring, we have too much water in the upper pool. And so in order to get rid of that water, the Corps opens all the gates in the dam, lets the water through. And when that happens, the lower pool starts, increasing in elevation until we get to a point where we have 0 head, the lower pool and the upper pool being equal. And so we have no vertical drop across our turbines in the plant, and therefore no generation. And so in that case, when we have high water situations, we normally have 0 output, and we're really just waiting until the water level drops until we start generating again. So as I mentioned, we have 3 different projects. The AMP Hydro project, Yellow Springs gets 799 kW or 0.79 megawatts out of the 208. And that's our most expensive project. That's $145 a megawatt hour. So That rate looked good 10 years ago with the rest of the market dropping. It's a little above market there. And then the Meldal and Greene Up projects are about $79 a megawatt hour. And you can see that the village gets 1.6 and 1.075 out of those. So about 45% of your energy in the long-term future will come from these 3 hydro plants there. And then we have the EDI landfill project that's expiring at the end of 2021. So that was a power purchase agreement that we did with EDI. And, the contract was set to expire at the end of 2021. So in this case, EDI, who owns the generation up there, they can make a lot more money by retiring their generation, cleaning up the gas and selling the gas into the natural gas system as renewable natural gas. So that's their plan starting in 2022. So we'll no longer have access to that green power from those landfills. And the Blue Creek Wind Project is 152 turbines, each about 2 megawatts. So there's 300 megawatts up there in Van Wert, Ohio. That's owned by Avangrid, so another power purchase agreement by AMP. That contract is set to expire in June of 2022. So those turbines will still be around, but AMP and Avangrid have not been able to reach an agreement on a new price to renew that contract. And we've got some better offers from solar and some other hydro. So right now we're choosing to let that contract expire and move in a different direction. And then on the solar side right now, Yellow Springs gets 1 megawatt from the solar facilities located in Yellow Spring. It's owned by AEP, so the village has a power purchase agreement in this case with AEP to buy that energy, as well as then by that plant being located inside the village. That reduces the meter that both Dayton Power and Light and PJM see when they calculate your transmission and installed capacity costs. So by lowering that meter, that saves about $50,000 in those delivery costs from last year, save you in 2021 costs there. We'll talk about how the transmission and capacity costs are calculated here in a few slides. And then finally, the last project that the village is involved with is called a JV2. So that's JV stands for joint venture. So the AMP hydro projects are owned by AMP. In this case, JV2 is owned by the participants. So Yellow Springs is a 1.05% owner. That project is made up of 34 diesel units and 3 gas turbines. Even though they're not located in Yellow Springs, we get the same type of savings as the solar. So we run those units during the transmission and capacity peak hours, and that lowers our delivery costs in those cities, but those savings then are shared by all the owners. So in 2020, we ran those units as we normally do, about 40 hours a year, and that saved Yellow Springs $93,000 in transmission and capacity costs. So because we run those a few number of hours, you won't really see those show up on that pie chart because there's really hardly any energy being supplied from those units. And also, finally, the units are there if we did have a big price spike in the market, for that 22% that you're buying from the market, we could always run those to supply energy. But typically, we haven't seen any price spikes for a number of years, so we haven't really needed those for that purpose there. So then, as Josue mentioned, we're looking for replacement for the landfill, EDI landfill, and the Blue Creek Wind. So the first thing we've found is another hydro plant that's located in Western Virginia. It's called Freeze Hydro. It looks like fries. So the owner of that has come to us with a 10-year proposal that was started in 2022, and that'd be a 10-year deal for a total of 5 megawatts. And we would recommend that the village, would get some of their power from that. One advantage of that location is that it's not on the Ohio River. So, as I mentioned, when we do get high water, flooding conditions, there could be times when all 5 of those hydro plants are down at 0, where the Freeze Hydro, it's on the New River in Virginia, so it would still be operating at that time because it doesn't have the high water derates like the other plants there. And So that rate on that for the 10 years is about, between 3.8 and 4.3 cents, so about 4 cents a kilowatt hour or $40 a megawatt hour. But we get the capacity as well as we get the RECs, the renewable energy credits. And one of the advantages of this plant is those RECs can not only be sold in Ohio, but they can be sold in Maryland, which is a little higher price right now. So if we look at the net price of those, Maryland RECs are going for about between $10 and $13 a megawatt hour. So if you subtract that from the 40, the energy out of that plant then is less than 3 cents a kilowatt hour or $30 a megawatt hour. And this just gives you an idea of current REC prices. You can see Maryland selling for about $14 a megawatt hour. For Ohio, prices have dropped down a little bit. We're down about $7 or $8 down at the bottom of that chart there. And then the second supply that we're looking at to replace EDI and Blue Creek would be additional solar on top of your 1 megawatt. So on the AMP side, we went out and issued an RFP to look for larger projects that are out connected directly to the grid. And not surprisingly, I guess, we got proposals from 33 projects located not only in Ohio, but throughout the PJM footprint. So we're negotiating with some of the lower costs right now. That would be about probably a 25-year deal. Prices start about $39. Then if you subtract out the capacity and REC credit, the net cost of those is about less than $20 a megawatt hour. As well as then, there's still the option to put additional solar in Yellow Springs. So overall, the village's portfolio can handle about another 2 megawatts of solar, whether it's, a combination of larger projects located directly in the grid or smaller projects that would be located in Yellow Springs there. So this kind of gives you a picture of how we came up with those recommendations. So the black line is the existing hydro, landfill, NIPA, and so that covers most of your base load. Then we're recommending another 1.16 megawatts of freeze hydro, which would be the red line. So that would get you up to this level. And then if we put in 3 megawatts of additional 2 megawatts plus your existing 1 megawatt of solar, that would take you to the yellow line there. So there's still going to be times, when you're on the market for about 7% of your power. You can see during mostly the warm, hot days in the summer and then the colder days in the winter. And so we would have the JV2 1.4 megawatts to back that up if needed there. So if we put all that together, you can see, down the road with the freeze hydro supplying about 16% of your energy and additional 2 megawatts of solar, another 11.8. That would get you about 93% of your portfolio coming from renewable resources with that last 6.7% approximately on the market there, which is the stuff that's, pretty sporadic, so harder to lock in a supply for there. So that takes care of your energy resources, as we mentioned. We'll be sending information down the road to talk about that freeze and solar opportunities. But so that makes up 75% of your power cost. The next 25% is what we call delivery charges. So as I mentioned a couple times, PJM and Dayton Power and Light. So Yellow Springs is connected to Dayton Power and Light's transmission system. And then Dayton Power and Light's system is operated by PJM, which originally stood for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland. So they're what we call a regional transmission organization. So they operate the grid, even though Dayton maintains ownership of their transmission system. And so all the load inside PJM can use all the lines in the grid to deliver their power from the resources to their load. But the way you pay for those lines is based on the transmission system that you're connected to. So Yellow Springs has somewhat of an advantage, just like other municipals in the Dayton zone, is that Dayton has one of the lower cost transmission systems compared to AEP, First Energy, and Duke down in Cincinnati. They're all a lot more expensive, but all of you can use the same transmission lines to source your power. So the way Dayton charges for their transmission system. They've joined all the rest of the zones in developing a formula rate. So that formula rate is approved by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the FERC. And what it says is each year Dayton, the numerator contains Dayton's O&M costs for operating their transmission system, as well as construction costs for building their system. And one of the big components of that construction cost is they're allowed to earn a 10% rate of return on their transmission investments. So, Dayton and most of the other transmission owners, if they've got money, they're going to make money for their stockholders. Well, they can put it in the bank and earn 0.5% on a CD, or they can build transmission assets and earn a 10% rate of return. So Dayton has joined the ranks of the formula, and we expect that the transmission rates will continue to go up into the future. As you can see, this year they've jumped up to $1.91 after a couple of years of going down from some credits that we got from the system. So we pay $1.91 per kilowatt per month for the transmission system. And in addition to that, since Yellow Springs receives their delivery from Dayton at 12,000 volts, which is considered distribution voltage, we have to pay an additional $1.32 per kilowatt per month to use their distribution system. So a total of $3.23 per kilowatt per month for transmission delivery across Dayton. So once that rate's established, then it's what the kilowatt amount is that Yellow Springs has to pay for. And the way Dayton determines that is they look at their single peak hour for the year, and whatever anybody's using at that time during that hour, that's how much transmission that they're going to pay for that upcoming year. So last year in 2020, we were looking back at 2019's peak, which was on July 19th at 3 o'clock, and the village was using 8.4 megawatts or 8,400 kW. And starting then in January of 2021, we switched over to looking at 2020 peak hour, which was on July 27th at 3 o'clock. You can see the village was able to lower their load down to 7.2 megawatts. And, as I looked at that, I said, well, maybe that was just due to more milder weather in 2020. But then if you look at the orange boxes, the Dayton peak actually went up. So in 2019, they were at 3255. And last year they were at 3,300. So Yellow Springs has done a good job of getting volunteer participation from the customers to lower their peaks during these peak hours, as well as some of the residential solar that's gone in, that's generating during those peak hours have both lessened our transmission bill there. So what's that mean to your overall cost? The white bar is, would be transmission cost, without any peak shaving, and then by the solar generating as well as JV2, and then volunteer efforts that reduced our net transmission cost down to $1 a megawatt hour, with an additional $3 for the distribution. So transmission distribution adds about $4 a megawatt hour to power cost, which is 0.4 cents per kilowatt hour. And then the second part of your delivery cost is what we call installed capacity, or considered backup capacity. So PJM, wants to make sure that when the coldest or hottest days of the year come around, that there's enough generation out there. So they pay generators to be on call when that time comes. And unlike transmission, where it's set by a formula rate, PJM sets the installed capacity rate based on an auction. So they take offers from all the generators to what they're willing to be paid to be on call, stack those up cheapest to most expensive. And as they get to that unit that they need to meet their peak, whatever that unit's offer cost is, that sets the cost of the installed capacity for the customers for the next year. And so that number, you can see it varies up and down. The last 2 years it's gone down because we've had a number of new natural gas fired generators being built, as well as solar and wind. So we've had an increase in supply, as well as then PJM has lowered their peak forecast. They've seen lower loads just like everybody else. So that reduced the cost coming out of the auctions. We're down right now at $2.34 per kilowatt per month. And that goes through May of 2021. So when we get to June of 2021, the auction that was run 3 years ago saw a little higher peak and some more retirements of generation and not much new generation coming in. So that raised the auction price up to $4.27. So the price is going to almost double when we get to June of 2021. And so once that rate's set, once again, how does that get charged to the customers? In this case, we're looking at the PJM peak hours, not just the single Dayton zone. We're looking at the entire PJM grid. And instead of just a 1 peak hour, we're looking at the 5 highest peak hours for the previous summer. So right now through the end of this month, we're still looking at the 2019 peak hours, and Yellow Springs average during those 5 was 7.959 megawatts. And when we get to June 2021, last summer, then we were able to reduce our peak load during a number of those PJM peak hours. So our average over those 5 peaks is only 7.284. So we'll see a reduction in megawatts, but the rate will be doubling. So not quite offset by the 700 kW of reduction in load there. So right now, your net cost of installed capacity after getting paid for your generation and your peak shaving is about $2 a megawatt hour, and that'll increase to about $5 a megawatt hour starting here in June. So $5 equates to about a half a cent per kilowatt hour. As I mentioned a few times, AMP, what our Energy Control Center in Columbus, we forecast the Dayton power and light load as well as the PJM load on a daily basis. And if we see a day that we think it's either going to be a Dayton or a PJM peak or both, we send out emails to our municipal members saying, hey, tomorrow could be a peak, usually between about 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock is when those peaks occur. And then, the village does a great job of putting that on their Twitter and Facebook pages. And then hopefully it looks, as we can see, looks like the customers then respond by reducing their load during those hours. And that flows through by lowering our transmission and distribution and capacity costs. And that lowers the cost of everyone's power during the next year. So starting in June, you'll start, if we see any hot days come up, we'll start seeing some messages from AMP, and then the residents will start seeing the messages on the Facebook and Twitter pages there to help us once again reduce 2021 peaks, which will show up in lower 2022 power costs. So if we put all these costs together, energy supply, then transmission, white, the black line is the distribution charges, and then the top line is the capacity charges. In 2021, we're expecting about $85 a megawatt hour total power cost to the village, which is about 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And then in 2022, with that EDI landfill expiring and being replaced by cheaper resources, whether it's the freeze hydro, solar, or the market, that'll give us a little bit of lower energy costs, offset by slightly higher capacity and transmission costs. But overall, we should see a reduction down to about $82 a megawatt hour, which is 8.2 cents per kilowatt hour. And that should stay relatively steady since most of our power supply contracts and projects are all relatively stable prices throughout the future. And right now, we're not expecting much increase in the installed capacity costs, with a small increase in the Dayton transmission cost there. So should be in that 8.2 cent range for the next 4 or 5 years.
Thank you, Mike.
Try to get a lot of information to you.
Yes, and we removed the five slides from the presentation, right? So, I think we're at 25 minutes. Does council have questions?
I have 2 questions. This is Lisa Krieger. Thank you for the presentation. It underscored that I'm not an expert and you are, but I do have questions. One is, there was a pie chart that showed the allocation of the different sources. Can you remind me, if we go with the freeze hydro, the total percentage of our energy source that is from hydro?
Yeah, so right now, the existing hydro is about 45%. So if we add another, 16%, and get us up to around 60% or so. I guess I forgot about NIPA. So NIPA is also hydro. So about 65% of your power would be coming from hydro resources.
Okay, yeah, that seems like a high percentage. The one other question, I used to live in Washington State. And in Washington State, there were always a lot of environmental concerns about the impact on fish and wildlife of hydro. So I'm wondering if your organization has any research that you might share of the environmental impact of hydro.
Yeah, I imagine we do. It hasn't come up very often, so we can dig some out for you. But yeah, the big thing about the difference between the Washington, the West Coast dams out, especially in Washington and Oregon, compared to the Ohio River, there are large dams that were put on, and they, created big reservoirs. And the big thing is the salmon can't get through the dams. Where on the Ohio River, all of the dams that were put in, they've been there since the 60s. And our turbines that were put in, they allow the fish to pass through pretty easily there. So we really haven't seen any. That was one of the things we had to study when we built the plan, is make sure we weren't going to kill it.
Yeah, I would love to see some of that, because I know that there is a concerted effort to bring the fish back to the Ohio River system. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Lisa, you raised a good point about the concentration on hydro sources for power, and that's a concern that we have internally, and it's something that we are reviewing as we look to what contracts to bring or opportunities to bring to council as we look to renew the EDI and the Blue Creek wind.
So I have a quick question, Mike.
Sure.
So net market, does that mean automatically non-renewable, or it depends?
I guess if you look at the overall PJM grid, there's about 5% of the, if you call it the market, is renewable.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the market, that the grid is, made up of natural gas, coal-fired, and nuclear generation there.
Okay, thank you.
So it's pretty much non-renewable, I would say.
Right. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
All right, thanks. Real quick. So I appreciate your concern, Mike, when you talked about having multiple hydro plants on the same river. And of course, makes Ohio River sound very unpredictable. But you mentioned that the New River, does it not, for the freeze hydro, so does the New River just not have those big swings in water supply, or was your point that you just separate them so you're not having one river impact multiple hydro plants?
Yeah, it has some of the swings, though. The freeze hydro plant, it has a large, we talked about the head on the Ohio River dams being about 20 to 25 feet. So it has a larger head. So really the low point in the freeze hydro is usually in the fall when it has, the drier water conditions there. But so it does better, in the spring when we have high water versus, there's a chance that all the 5 hydro plants on the Ohio River could be at zero there. So one of the options we looked at was buying some additional hydro from members that were willing to sell their amp hydro Meldal at market prices. But yeah, that would add an additional layer of risk to you, that you'd be getting more of your power from those same resources there. So that was one of the nice things about the freeze hydro. It was a different river and different operating conditions.
Cool, great. And one minor thing, Josue, it may be too soon to figure this out, but I think what I heard Mike say is a 0.5 cent. So I think last meeting you compared our costs of power, and I might be mixing apples and oranges, but we were at like 11 cents per kilowatt hour. And again, if I'm mixing up stories, that's so fine. But I'm just wondering, did I hear that we're going to go up for potentially a 0.5 cent in those costs? And if you don't know based on what the mix is going to be, we can come back to that. But I'm just trying to piece all that together in my head.
Kevin, are you talking about with the replacement of the EDI and the Blue Creek? What will be the net effect of on the rate?
Right.
If you look at these rates, the solar is definitely competitive with what we're replacing. We're right now at 8.2 cents a kilowatt hour. The solar, as the AMP community is currently negotiating it could bring that rate down as much as 2 cents a kilowatt hour, which will make it extremely competitive with anything else that would come, and it will be cheaper than what we are replacing the EDI. Mike, do you want to go back to that slide on what the rate is for the EDI and the proposed the Blue Creek? So the
EDI is $59 a megawatt hour.
Yeah, so that's almost 6 cents a kilowatt hour, and the Blue Creek is for 2021 is at 4.8 cents, and for 2022 will be 5.4 cents a kilowatt hour. So both of these projects have or coming in at lower than what the expiring contracts are. So the solar could be as low as 2 cents a kilowatt hour, and the freeze would be. Can you go to that slide, Mike?
The freeze once you sell the RECs would be starting at 4, and the energy value is 2.8, so that compares with the 5.9 for EDI there.
Right. So at the 5, it's close to what we will be paying in one of those two other contracts expiring. So the savings to be generated would come out of the solar project.
Okay.
So I think overall, to get straight to your answer, is with what this proposal contemplates, there would be either no upward effect on the price with the potential of a downward or the reduction on price. Mike, did I capture that well?
Yeah, so so that goes back to that last slide that, the 11 cents that the village charges right now includes, what we call a power cost adjustment. So as the power costs move up and down. So at this year, we're expecting 8.5 cents of wholesale power from AMP, and then the rest of that 11 cents goes to pay the village distribution costs. So next year with the replacement of the EDI with the solar and the freeze, we'd be expecting 8.2 cents, so approximately a 0.3 cent overall reduction in the village's power cost, which would flow through the power cost adjustment of that 11 cents there.
Okay, great. Appreciate all the information. Great presentation. Thank you.
So this is Laura Krillis. So you clarified one of my questions is that your rate assumptions, one of the assumptions assumes we're going to sell the RECs.
Right.
Right. And then regarding solar, there's obviously some significant savings if we build our own in our own village limits. I do have a concern about building on prime farmland and prime soils, and many of these solar projects do that. So my hope is that if we have to buy solar power outside the village limits, that we can buy it from a project that is built on industrial legacy land or some other type of land that is already disturbed or does not have high agricultural value. So there are a lot of projects out there. If you can pick and choose, that would be great. And my final comment is, Josue, if you could tell the public, I like to get texts when that peak power time is coming. How do we get a text that we could turn off our power?
That's an excellent question, Laura. We don't have a we do have a text messaging system, but we leave that for emergency usage. That's our HyperReach system. We do participate in the alert system. We do Facebook posts, websites, and email. So we'll continue to explore what other avenues to alert the public of peak shaving opportunities. Yellow Springs, as you can tell from Mike's presentation, we have done well to conserve energy during those peak shaving opportunities. Some of the things that we do here administratively is cut our own power consumption. So making sure that we're not running our pumps and other high energy usage equipment during those peak shaving opportunities times.
Well, I'd like to point out too, I hope there, as you said, Mike, residential solar, there was a big push to do residential solar. We're in that 2018, 2019 period, 2020.
It's been during my time, 2019, 2020.
So seems like that's had an impact, which is awesome.
Yeah, so Mike but his data doesn't capture that local consumption or generation. Those are things that I mentioned that the next chart that I put together on our sources and power usage would include residential solar. One of the things I'll point out, Laura, that you can see that our wholesale cost of power is costing us 8.2 cents, and we're paying residential solar customers 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So we're paying them more than what it's costing us to buy it in the wholesale market. So I think that you see that we're certainly supporting residential solar generation by what we're paying.
Josue, I do have a question though. I noticed on my last bill that my cost to the village was more like 18.5 cents a kilowatt hour. And I just am curious about, I keep hearing this 11 cent number, but I can't imagine our village distribution adder is 7 cents, but maybe it is.
I wonder how you're calculating your number, because there's a readiness for services. And if you're adding your total power consumption and the readiness for service fee, and you're dividing your kilowatt usage by the number, it may be a higher number, but the kilowatt charge is 11 cents per kilowatt hour. So it sounds like an individual item that we can follow up offline and review that with you.
Yeah, and I'm going to break in here because we're well over 30 minutes for an agenda item that we allocated quite a bit of time for. So I will say the one thing that flagged right away was, Josue, when you said that we're paying out more than the cost, because my understanding is that we created an ordinance that was going to adjust with those costs. But it sounds like we've got some things to revisit. I've seen Matthew Kirk's hand up. I don't know if he's got a comment about this or if that's just accidental, but we do need to wrap this up. But Matthew, if you have something you wanted to ask or comment on, or if that's just accidental, but we do need to wrap this up. But Matthew, if you
I do have a comment, Brian.
Okay.
Yeah, let me adjust my viewing and talking situation. You there?
We are.
So I guess I watched the whole presentation and I thought it was very thorough. And I think one thing that really stood out was that we get a lot of value from local power generation by generating our own resources. Not only do we know that the energy that we're going to be consuming has been generated in a clean fashion, but we also save on transmission costs because we're right here at the source. And I think that should really be considered and heavily prioritized moving forward. Because a lot of these distant projects, the reality is we don't actually get those electrons. We get whatever electrons are closest to us. These projects that sound green or whatever, those are fantastic. Those electrons go to the people that live by the Ohio River, because that's just how it goes. We largely are still consuming electrons that are generated by dirtier resources because of the nature of the area where we live. And so the more that we can make this power source, I think, closer to our own system, makes a lot of sense. And obviously, there is a commercial viability to it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to site a 1,200-acre solar farm right outside the village. So I think, we should maybe factor that in a little bit. Thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, Matthew. All right.
I can answer briefly, Brian, just to say that, Johnny and I have been working very diligently on creating opportunities to build additional solar. We got the solar pavilion, the 2 megawatt system. We have been working over the last couple of months to get a pricing. We've reached a point where the one-on-one conversations with various stakeholders isn't going to get us there. So we're working on putting out an RFP, and we hope to come back to council with several options. Mike and his team has done a wonderful job. I think these two projects are right in the ballpark of what we need it to be, and they're renewable, which even makes it even better. But we want to come back to council and say July or August with the other options that we are exploring. And I think that our community will be excited to hear about the solar pavilion and our other options.
All right. Thanks, Josue. And I think, great presentation. And we definitely allocated quite a lot of time to that information. So thanks a lot. All right, Matt Dillon.
Thank you.
Quarterly financials.
Thank you, Brian. I was hoping to share my screen. Just I have one page I'd like to share with everyone.
You should be able to now, Mike. I'm sorry, Matt. Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Can everyone see that? Hello?
No, I can't see that.
Can you see that?
Well, we see you.
I can pull it up on my screen if you want, Matt. You're talking about the dashboard.
Yeah, it's just page 56 of the agenda packet. Josue, I'm just going to show my summary sheet.
Mm-hmm. There we go. We have it up if you want to.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. So in 2021, we began the year with $9,850,811. As of March 31st, the end of the first quarter, we incurred expenses of $2,283,974.29, while also taking in revenues of about $2,961,499. This represented an increase to our cash position of $677,000 over the 3 months that we are reporting for 2021. Again, revenue up until March 31st, we took in $2,961,499. This represents 23.5% of our budget revenue for the year, and this would include 25% of the year being all the way completed. So again, we're trending slightly lower than we anticipated at 23.5% for this time of the year, but we are pretty close, and we'll be watching that very tightly as things progress. For the expenses at this point in the year, March 31st, once again, we have expended $2,283,974.29. This actually only represents 16% of the annual budget for the year at 25% of the year completed. And I would like to direct your attention to two new graphs that I'm sharing with you for the first time. And the first we'll look at is the revenue, or we can look at revenue and expense at the same time. But the revenue, for example, you'll see that the orange solid line represents the budget, and our actuals would be the solid blue block underneath, showing that we are slightly underneath our revenue expectations. The same principles would apply to the expense analysis graph, showing that we are actually trending favorably underneath our budgeted anticipated expenses for this point in the year. The other piece of the information that I wanted to share with you and discuss would just be the bank report. And I have provided a summary at the bottom of the page I'm sharing here. to just illustrate what financial institutions we currently are active in and where our funds currently reside. Again, at this snapshot in the year, March 31st would be the end of our first quarter. We have a cash position of $10,528,337.45. And that will conclude my portion of the presentation.
That chart for revenues and expenses, we had Mary Ann in consideration because she requested having a graphic illustration of how the revenues budgeted and actuals compared. And so Matt's put this nice set of graphs together to visually illustrate that. And so if that blue line crosses over that orange line, if it's on the revenue sign, that's a good sign. If it's on the expense sign, not so good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And that visuals is very helpful, I think. That line, that straight line for the budget and then the actuals and how that compares, it's very helpful. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Matt? Okay, Judy, do we need to take a vote to approve the quarterly financials?
Do indeed.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the quarterly financial report.
I'll second.
Okay, Judy, if you could call the roll, please.
All right, Krieger.
Yes.
Curlis.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do not have old business, so we're going to move into new business. And the first item is Laura is going to talk about health insurance for elected officials.
Actually, this is access, and I don't have a proposal right now, but Judy and I talked about gathering some information from other jurisdictions. You know, I'm aware that many jurisdictions at least allow public officials to have access. My idea would be that it would be the elected officials would pay the full premium amount. And there are and there's even an ethics opinion on this, that the official could choose, instead of getting a payroll deposit, that their normal amount that they get as compensation for their position could be used to pay that premium in equal measure. So I'm hoping to bring you a more complete description of the proposal next time.
All right. Thank you, Laura. And I do appreciate, comments you've made before, which, I know resonate with when Judith Hempfling brought up sort of the increase in our stipend as council members so that we could be in the retirement program, and that this is potentially a way to encourage more people to run for elected office. So thank you very much. All right, next up is also Laura and
Brian, remember I had asked if I could go early?
Yeah, I was waiting for you to say that with the agenda planning, but I guess I'm okay with moving that irregardless. So, all right, hearing no objections, I guess I didn't allow for any. We'll go ahead and talk about the proposal for climate action coordinator. Mary Ann.
Thank you, Brian. And I had asked to go first in old business because this is going to take a bit of time, and I just wanted people to be relatively fresh when they were listening to it. I also want to apologize for not getting this in the packet. I had sent it, but it didn't get sent. I've been having Wi-Fi problems and email problems. So next time I will ensure that Judy has gotten my reports in time. So sorry. So what I would like to do, and hoping that you have read the proposal for the pilot project for the climate action plan, is to go over the proposal and why it is important to do and how it could work. So we face a profound issue globally regarding climate change and other global issues that have come about primarily because of the impact of our global economic system and the availability of fossil fuels. And while the economic global system has created a lot of products, food, technology, good things, it has done that at a huge cost to the systems of the earth and also to a number of the humans and other species who have not benefited from this. Climate change is the largest presenting issue that we're becoming more and more aware of, but it's just one of many caused by this whole global economic system of which we are embedded, which means that we not only need to focus on lowering our carbon footprint, we also need to think of how we can create Yellow Springs to be more resilient and sustainable. And this means that over the next years and decades, we're going to need to radically change how we produce food, how we produce products, what products we use and what products we don't use, what kinds of fuel and energy sources we use, how we use land, and how we use our transportation modes. A lot of what needs to be done has to happen at the national and international level. In Yellow Springs, we don't have much to do about fuel economy or what kind of vehicles come through our village. However, a lot of things can and have to be done at the local level. And we can go through examples for all of the domains of our climate action plan: transportation, energy, buildings, native habitat, water, food. All of these have things that can be done at the local level. And we've just heard a presentation about our electric system and how we can increase our use of renewable resources, as well as how we can do things in Yellow Springs to increase our renewable energy sources, particularly solar. We also have to plan, as I said, for how we can create our community to be more resilient to deal with the issues of climate change that will continue to become magnified. So we need something that's organized. We need an organized program, and it has to be funded by a position within the village government. In 2014 and up till present, I've been involved in various efforts to deal with climate change. One of the first was a group of citizens. We called ourselves the Yellow Springs Resilience Network. And for about 2 years, we operated trying to be a network to look at the various issues involved in climate change and sustainability. And we put on programs. Some of you may have come to some of the programs, and some of you may have remembered there was, I think, sort of like a Christmas tree that was put downtown with plastic bags to sort of showcase how much plastic we use. But that effort failed because it wasn't a focused plan and it wasn't funded. Again, the Environmental Commission tried in 2017 and 18 to start a climate action plan, which then languished again because there wasn't the capacity to sustain that plan. We have some local efforts, Mothers Out Front, Citizens Against Climate, or for carbon tax, that have been trying to work locally. But so far, we have never had a climate action plan that has been sustained. So we find ourselves really behind the times. All major Ohio cities have a climate action plan that's funded by the municipal government. And Ohio is not exactly the environmental leader in this country. While Yellow Springs has a lot of pieces of the plan, we don't actually have a focused plan. So how can a plan benefit Yellow Springs? Well, it will put a concerted effort and a concerted focus on what is a very difficult and complex problem. It will enable us to establish goals and to measure the progress toward those goals. By having such a plan located in the village government, we can find linkages between the village government and organizations and businesses. Also, linkages within the village government that we might not be aware of, efficiencies that we might not be aware of, collaboration and joint projects. We also position ourselves to be able to seek funding sources and funding opportunities that are only available to municipalities that have a climate action plan. And one thing that I have just come to understand more recently is there's actually an opportunity in this, what is a profound problem. We have people, because we have a profound problem and because humans are inventive and creative, we have people looking for how to deal with this problem. We have people in our region who are finding economic opportunities on how to solve some of these climate action issues. Lastly, having a climate action plan will enable everyone in the village to feel like they can be a part of something. I think that one of the issues facing us is that the climate action, the climate problems seem so huge that it's easy to try to ignore them or to feel like there's nothing we can do. But by having a plan in place, every single person in the village can find a way to contribute to this plan. And when people are working towards something bigger than themselves, it makes people feel good. So I think that is that will definitely be a plus. So we need to have someone who leads this program, who has experience, focus, works well with others, inspires others, thinks big, and at the same time can be practical. And we have such a person available to us. We are very fortunate because there aren't that many people that have the experience that Piper Fernway has, who I am recommending to head this program. We also in Yellow Springs have a small cadre of young leaders, and we have a village manager who's one of them, people in their 30s, 40s, who really understand this problem because they've been living with it, they've been growing up with it. And more than any of us who, like myself, are older, and I'm not looking toward my future particularly, but people in their 30s are looking toward their future, and they understand what the problem is. And I know that we have people that are going to step up and be able to work on this issue. So how would this work? What I'm proposing that the village hire on a contract part-time basis a coordinator for probably 6 months starting in July. And the coordinator would report to the village manager. Council would have input on what the pilot project looks like, what the coordinator would do. And the Environmental Commission could serve as a support and resource system, sort of like a board for the coordinator. So I would like to turn it over to Josue to talk about how he sees this from his point of view as the village manager and how he sees this working for the village government.
Thank you, Marianne. I think you did a great job of covering all the elements around the need for a climate action plan. I think the timing of it, I don't know that we could have planned it better on the night of having a portfolio review of our energy portfolio. And, we're looking at potentially what could be 93% renewable energy portfolio. And so when Marianne says we've got a lot of the elements of a climate action plan, our actions speak for what intentions we've had. We've been clear about what we wanted to accomplish. We haven't had a document that consolidates the strategy or talks about the strategy or proposes a comprehensive strategy. I think that given all the demands and the expectations we have in our community, the climate action plan is a long overdue development tool that should be put in place. We're dealing with other climate action challenges that we currently don't have or at least prior to me, had a strategy to deal with. That's infiltration and inflow. As you know, that since my team and I've been dealing with it, we've been able to reduce 100,000 gallons of water in the daily flow. So we've done great work there, and we are addressing water loss challenges. And so all that work, it typically is guided by some overall strategy, and the climate action plan will help put in place a comprehensive strategy, or at minimum, a roadmap of which direction we want to head into. And then I and any future managers, I plan to be here a long time, but I and future managers can follow the playbook and deliver on the council and the community's vision around climate action.
Okay, so I think I'm sure Marianne and Josue are interested in council feedback on this, and Matthew Kirk, I see your hand up, so we'll get to you next. Laura, Lisa, Kevin, any comments, questions?
Well, I certainly appreciate Marianne taking the lead on this. It sounds like there's been a great deal of thought put into it, I think enough information has been shared to suggest that if it can be worked out from a financial perspective, and there are no other hurdles, I think it would be an absolute positive move to go forward with this.
Okay. Laura?
I'm all for a climate action plan, and I think in particular it needs to focus on reducing the carbon footprint, sequestering carbon, et cetera. I'm a little bit more hesitant on funding a position to do it. I think that people in the village individually are very aware of these issues, and many, maybe a majority of people do take action. I like the coordination idea. I like having a lot of input from a lot of, I'm trying to remember what Marianne called them, but different areas of village life, from pollinator issues to, active transportation. So I guess in general, I'm in favor of the Environmental Commission has been working on it. And getting that plan put together, but I want to understand why we need a funded position. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa.
I'm in favor of having a plan. As I think about it, it seems to me that there's a fair amount of domain expertise that would be required to bring all these different aspects together into a cohesive plan. And that may be justification for a part-time contractor, at least for a period of time, to create the plan that would then be worked by volunteers and the village team. It's hard for me to make a final decision without understanding the budget proposal and the source of the funding. So, in principle, I'm in support, but, I think we need to know more for next steps. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Matthew Kirk.
We need to know more for next steps. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, Matthew, did you have a comment, Matthew? All right. I think Matthew's gone. Okay, so my thought is things that resonate with me beyond the comments that I heard are looking for efficiencies and ultimately reducing costs while being a good environmental steward. And I think this is where a lot of these positions do come from. I think it's important to highlight the pilot aspect, and I like what Lisa highlighted related to that. In terms of funding, but I don't think we're making a decision tonight. I believe we've got a little bit of money in the Green Space Fund, maybe around 10,000, and we have a little bit of money after our commitment to the Glen from the Rex sale. So I think those are things that we can look at. But I think we've heard enough from council to indicate that a proposal, I've got you, Matthew, you don't have to wave that much, to bring a proposal back that relates to some of those questions. All right, so Matthew, you can mic on now.
Okay, great. You know, what I would like to propose for this is why don't we take a very measured, practical approach and look at who are our, top 20 or top 50 energy users, whether they're commercial users or residential users, and assign that position to work with those people so that they could identify ways to reduce their energy costs. I think largely with systems, a lot of people are pretty even, and then you have some people that are on the spiky end, right? So if we can maybe use this person to help address some of the spiky end consumers, that'd be a great way to offset the cost of adding the position.
Okay. Good feedback, Matthew. And I think if we don't have any other comments, Marianne, do you feel like you've gotten enough feedback or anything else you want to discuss?
Yeah. So what I would like to do is work with Josue to bring a proposal to council for its next meeting. I guess it would be a resolution of support from council. Is it, Brian? What do you think? Does that sound?
Yeah, I think a resolution might make sense. Yeah.
Josue?
Yes, it works. It works for me. And I think from a funding source, we presented in the past before. So I think we're in that place where we can come back with a resolution.
And so the proposal would also say how we're proposing to fund it.
Correct.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Marianne. I think we all agree this is a critical thing to focus on. And I like the idea of trying to get more traction based on our past experience of not getting much traction. All right. So we're going to turn to talking about COVID protocols. The next item is related to our local ordinances around COVID restrictions. And so, Laura, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Great. So my memo talked about, I think we are at the point as of just this past week of eliminating the masking requirement out of doors. And that's because science has shown there's literally not one reported case in the entire world of casual outdoor transmission. But we're not going to do that tonight. However, as of June 2nd, as the village solicitor pointed out, the governor's, he's asked the Ohio Department of Health to end its orders. So as of then, what do? We're adrift in a sea of scientific studies and varying advice. And I certainly would, two things, love to hear from businesses about, on what basis would we require masks indoors, even after the state no longer requires it. I think businesses might want our support on indoor masking, and we need to decide under what conditions and if there are any exemptions such as for vaccinated people. And, like any other medical condition, as we dealt with in the masking ordinance, as Chief knows, when an officer asks if they produce the card, great, or you go by their word. So the chief can comment on that. But in any event, That would encourage people to get vaccinated, which we want. We want to up those numbers because there are benefits to being vaccinated, as in looser mask requirements indoors. So I'd like to eliminate it outdoors and have a discussion about indoor masking, whether we have an ordinance after June 2nd, and whether, that would be supportive of the businesses. So we need to hear from them. And then finally, as Megan pointed out, what do we do about our building, the John Bryan Center, and having in-person meetings indoors?
Okay, thanks, Laura. And I think your memo was very clear. So, we've got some good issues to focus on. I do think it's important for council members to weigh in on thoughts related to our local ordinances. So, and Josue, I want you to also talk about this as well. So, Kevin, Lisa, Marianne?
Well, I'll start. I'll start first with council meetings. I am comfortable, I guess, say June 2nd. Well, I'm not sure when our June meeting.
June 7th. June 7th, I think, is the first meeting.
Yep.
I'm comfortable having in-person council meetings. So that's where I weigh in on that. In terms of our, and I'm also comfortable having people outside downtown not have masks. In terms of businesses, I have concern for people that work in the businesses because they we have a council meeting that lasts 2, 3, maybe 4 hours, but someone who works in a business is there for maybe 8 hours or more. So I'm less clear about how we want to support businesses and wearing masks in the businesses, but I do want to support businesses.
Okay, thanks, Marianne. Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Brian. Well, I certainly echo Marianne's thoughts. After the governor's mandate and our orders have expired, I too would be comfortable meeting in person. I'd also be comfortable still doing the Zoom for a little bit longer. Regarding the businesses in town, I think we should allow them to, and if I'm not mistaken, I think the governor still suggests that maybe municipalities or businesses can still decide what they want to do. The director of the CDC says, folks who are not vaccinated have to be honest with themselves. So mathematically speaking, everyone hasn't been vaccinated. So, the orders being lifted doesn't fix that problem. It may encourage folks to get vaccinated, but I think shop owners should be able to make decisions about how they want to protect their workers, and I think we should support whatever decisions they make. Again, yes, it's a good time for us to start perhaps relaxing some of these restrictions, but the pandemic is not over. Everyone has not been vaccinated. So, we don't just do a complete 180 and go back to normal. I think we ought to be cautious and mindful about what changes we make going forward. We do want to be clear, however, so there's no confusion about where we stand and the degree to which we support local businesses and individuals in making individual personal decisions about their health and livelihood.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Lisa Krieger?
Yeah, so, I've certainly been following the CDC as well as the state of Ohio. I stand with my colleagues in nursing who are very, very concerned about the direction that the CDC is going. And I believe that it's not good. And I believe that we will have another significant surge because of the number of people who are not vaccinated, who aren't going to get vaccinated, never wanted to wear masks, and now won't. That said, with great worry, I'm absolutely willing to come back to in-person meetings. I think the commission's should have the right to weigh in on whether they want to. I wouldn't want to mandate volunteer citizen participation in a commission and say, if you won't meet in person at this point, you can't serve. So I don't know if we can do a hybrid. I also agree that outside, I'm comfortable for people to not wear masks. And I believe that we should let some of our businesses have the tables outside on the sidewalk again, outside. I think Laura made a really good point about talking to the businesses about what they want to do. Because I remember when we first started having the mask mandate, some business owners expressed to me that they appreciated us taking a stand because it made it more comfortable for them to require it. So that the masks inside, I think from a safety perspective, we should be wearing masks inside if we're not vaccinated. And I don't believe that people who are not vaccinated will wear masks necessarily. So that's the one area I'm more open and up in the air. Thanks.
All right, thanks. All right, I'm going to say a few things, and then I also want to hear from Josue and Chief.
Brian, when you get to it, I've got an email from Brittany Baum and a couple of comments. I'll drop them in regarding businesses if you give me time when you're. Okay, thank you. So first of all, I think and Dino, I see your hand, so we'll get to you as well. I appreciate Lisa noting what we learned, at least I heard it on Sunday, that the nurses union is adamantly opposed to the CDC recommendations and feel that that this is too early. I think because we appreciate the impacts on disadvantaged communities, I think one thing that is recognized is that a lot of folks, whether it is people of color or folks that are low income, are not able to even get to those vaccines. They can't drive, they don't have support. I wish that the $1 million lottery was involved in investing in getting people to the shots, rather than, I guess, the direction that the state has decided to go with that. And I think the other thing that that I think is really important is that, as several have mentioned, that we are supporting our local businesses in the decisions that they want to make. And I've certainly been to a lot of communities where some businesses are making the choice that they still want their patrons to wear masks, and others are not enforcing that. And I'll say as a side note, I don't believe that we've ever forced any business to follow these protocols. I think it's been a good thing. And I think the safety aspect has been what has kept local businesses thriving downtown. The last thing I'll say is, this is not black and white. And this idea that, it's the science. We have another data set that the CDC is not talking about, and that is human behavior. And so we have estimates of anywhere from 36% to 46% of populations being vaccinated. And, I know a standard that's been out there is, let's at least get to 50%. But one thing we do know about human behavior is that, and this was expressed before, people that don't want to wear a mask and don't want to be vaccinated are going to do what they want, and they now have license to do that. But all that being said, I'm mostly interested in supporting our local businesses in backing them up on their decisions. But I also recognize that we, again, are a unique village with a very tight downtown. And I also want to balance that, as we've always done, with the safety of our residents. So, Chief Carlson.
There you go.
Thanks, Brian. Well, as we know that this has been a complex situation for everyone, particularly the peace officers who are still handing out masks and reminding folks. I think one of the things that we've seen downtown is not necessarily just blatant defiance, but the fact that so many other places are relaxed and people have been coming in, since the weather's been good. And so they just don't know. Try to avoid my opinion and stuff, but maybe, that's not always the best thing to do. So since you asked, I believe that our establishments should be allowed to put their tables out front. People can create as much distance between them as others as they feel comfortable with. And regarding the businesses, always in support of those, but they are private entities, so they can legally do whatever they want. And if they want to insist that patrons wear masks, then we will assist that when they would like us to have people removed. Other than that, the stats have gotten a lot smaller, very few calls on mask issues. The calls that we did have were also consistent with the same people who, we work with on a regular basis. So that being said, in a nutshell for me, I'd like to see the streets loosened up a little bit, and I'm not sure what the businesses want to do. For me personally, I'm comfortable with business as usual here, but that's because we've kind of been in that mode to begin with, just by nature of what we do. So, but I'm also comfortable with the Zoom thing. I really like it. It allows me in meetings to definitely kind of get work done as well as then participate. But I am at your disposal. So if anybody has any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, thank you, Chief. Josue.
All right, thank you, Brian. I'll knock the easy one out of the way. Then that is supporting council and its efforts to have in-person meeting. My position hasn't changed much since a couple months ago. If council's ready to come back into an in-person council meeting, we can support that. We've got the technology in place. If we need to acquire any additional technology, we can make it happen. I think one of the things I've been cautious is to manage expectations around quality of sound. It becomes a lot more challenging to maintain the quality sound that we have developed with these Zoom meetings. Now we're able to bring in folks from anywhere in the country to deliver a message or provide a presentation. If we did a hybrid model, which is what I think there's some demand for, that council members be in person and participants can be in person or virtual, that creates a bit of a technology challenge around sound. How do we would have to mic up every council member in person and bring in audio and video systems into the room so that council members can view participants who choose to participate virtually. So if that's the way the council wanted to go, we'll find a way to make that work. We just want to manage the expectation that it might not be the high quality sound and video production that we've been able to develop so far. In terms of space where that can happen, I would avoid the gym. The gym just has bad acoustics, and we tried that and it just frankly didn't work. So I think council members should have their meetings here in the chamber, and we'll can put in the technology to bring in the others, so both into the room and virtually. But I would like to hear what council's desires are so that I can put a plan in place and a timeline in place. But the short of it is, if June 7th you want to be in person, we'll make that happen. On the other issues or the other topics of discussion, I've read through the CDC statements, I've read through the Nurses Association and following the science, and it is a difficult one because I read that New York Times article too, that there wasn't a single documented outdoor transmission. I think, I regret to say this, but I think the CDC has done somewhat of a disservice to us in the messaging, and it's put all the municipalities in a difficult challenge, particularly municipalities like us that we are very responsive to our the community concerns, and we have a good pulse on particular demographics of community, right? We have an older community, we are perhaps more susceptible to the transmission, and we also care about not just our own health, but other people's health, even if they don't care for their own health. And so it puts municipalities like us in a difficult situation. But what are we to do when we are surrounded by a constituency that could care less about the preventative measures? We've got a state governor that has sunset the provisions on June 2nd and basically has said, now individual responsibility must carry on or must kick in. So following the science, or at least what the CDC has put out now and what other epidemiologists have reported on the CDC data, I don't think we have a basis for an outdoor mask enforcement. I don't see it. The CDC and the other epidemiologists with what they're reporting, we don't have it. So could we do an outside mask enforcement? Obviously we have the home rule power that we could, and do we have science to base it when the CDC has lost some credibility and put us in this difficult position? On the indoor masking, I think this questions really would probably need input from the businesses, because it would go a long way for businesses to do enforcement if we had a mask requirement indoors. I think that will go a long ways with compliance and helping those businesses. But I think that's an input that perhaps we want to hear from the businesses. I know Dino is here, and I will welcome that feedback. Regarding the tables and physical distancing, again, that's also one of those things that if the mask requirements and there's no documented transmission on outdoor COVID cases, what do we have to stand on to require mask or physical distancing for outside dining? I think it's a challenge. So I'd say that we are in a position to allow those back. What I would consider is that with COVID, under the COVID pandemic, people have been more sensitive about spaces and outdoor spaces. And the congestion in our sidewalks were a problem pre-COVID. Now folks are more sensitive to that. And so that's something that maybe council should revisit, that we allow private enterprises to use public space for commercial activities. Not all the tables that are outside are on private property. They are on public property, and that's public right-of-way that the public owns. So it's something for us to consider as we look to create the Yellow Springs a little more adaptable in dealing with what is COVID and the COVID transmissions. And I tell you that from what I'm reading from the literature, COVID, we may be living it now, but we may have more COVIDs down the road. And so we have to live in a post-COVID environment. And what does that look like from space design? And that's where the use of public spaces or constriction of the sidewalks in our downtown will come into play. I think I answered all the areas. Happy to weigh in on more information.
But one question that I think an issue that was brought up by someone is what's the protocol for for the village team right now, and where do you see that going?
Yeah, most of our team is vaccinated. So we're happy to report that we have a high compliance rate amongst the team. I think within the internal team, we obviously as a society, we're not going to reach herd immunity until the number of complete vaccinations is what Fauci initially started reporting 60, then he upgraded it to 80%. Are we going to get to that 80%? Probably as a society, we're in Yellow Springs, we probably get there, but as Ohio, probably not. I think that our labor force is up there in that 80% percentage rate, but that's not all the people we have to worry about, right? We have people coming in that is unmasked. So I am going to get with Brianne and with our HR advisors about next steps for the use in space inside the John Bryant Center. For the time being, we're going to hold on to our policy until at least through June 2nd that mask is expected and required, and we'll change as after I've convened with my team.
Okay. Thanks, Josue. All right, I'm gonna, and Kevin, I saw that you have a hand up, but I'm gonna have Dino and then hear from the others from Judy. So Dino, you want to mic on?
Hello, everybody. I'm dizzy, and I'm sure you're dizzy, so I wanted you to enjoy this. Let me put this simply. I just look for a unified front starting from Village Council to give us not guidance, but to take a stand and let's move forward. I don't want to be on the firing line. My team doesn't want to be on the firing line. And that's essentially when the governor did what he did, CDC did what we did, you're putting the onus on us. None of us want to be there. And I'm only going to speak for my business. I'm not going to speak for anybody else's business. I just know we had a couple issues this weekend, and we've always had some issues that we deal with. At this particular time, we had to call the police because it just got a little bit out of hand. We just don't want to be put on we don't want to be put on the front line. That's not what I'm here to do, is police and be adversarial. That's not what helps my business grow, is being adversarial with my customer base. So that's what we want from you. That's what I want from you guys, is just a definitive answer. Let's go with it. I don't care which way it is. I just want an answer that we're going on, that we have a plan and we're going forward with it. It'll make things cleaner and easier for all of us. And again, I'm only speaking for me and my business, but I see what transpires with my team. And no one likes to be put in that position. And it's always a weekend thing. It's not during the week. It's always a weekend thing when we will get challenged. That's what I'm looking for from you guys. That's what I hope we can get through something tonight to resolve it. And again, I'm not talking about the outside, but it's more so the inside. This is where the issues are coming up. And that's where I just don't want to be on the firing line for that. And I want clarity from you guys, and that's what that's what I voted for you guys for. Let's get some clarity, make a decision, and we'll go forward with it. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Dino. Judy, why don't you share some of the things that you had?
Okay. Brittany Baum had made the comment saying, I urge the Village of Yellow Springs to modify their mask ordinance and dining guidelines to follow CDC guidelines. She says, should business owners want to institute stricter mask policies, I think they should be able to. And then she had sent over that she'd posted it on a Facebook account. So then she had agreement with that point of view from Wildflower Boutique, Springer Teas, Glen Garden Gifts, and Morgan House. So you've got a few businesses weighing in. I just wanted to pass that on.
Okay, thanks, Judy. All right, Matthew Kirk.
Hey, Brian. Hey, so just wanted to share a little bit of my experience with the mask, not mask ordinance. I was in the tourist capital of the world last week, Las Vegas, Nevada. And literally, like Friday, I'm sitting by the pool and I get up to leave and I put my mask on. And the guy next to me is like, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. You know, because there had been the CDC announcement earlier. And I think that is what you're going to be dealing with once people have, especially people that have been vaccinated. You know, they're going to want that sense of freedom, and to put that level of policing on the businesses, to the local law enforcement or anything like that. I think, to be honest, we have been a leader on this issue for so long. In some ways, we are going to have to kind of follow what the larger society things are. And the reality is, in Yellow Springs, our rates are incredibly low. If you looked at that Greene County report from earlier, you know, you looked at the zip code that was Yellow Springs, and it was not applicable because we didn't have any COVID cases. So, I mean, I think to say that we're going to have a basis to continue to enforce a mask mandate that is relative to the CDC or the state guidelines is just going to create a lot of problems for us. So if anything, we should work on maybe expanding the space where people can interact. adding more picnic tables to Beatty Hughes or along the bike path, not Greene, whatever the opportunities are. Maybe go that route, because I think trying to keep a mask mandate up is going to be very, very difficult. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Kate Hamilton.
Hi, thanks. I just was curious where you were going to stand on buskers and other merchants that set up tables and such, because it usually causes a bit of a traffic jam. And that's all. I was just curious about that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I think that is something that I imagine this is going to be a two-part conversation, but I think we may be able to make some decisions tonight. Okay, Kevin, you've been waiting patiently.
Oh, thank you, Brian. I appreciate all the comments that have been shared. I just want to not moderate, but just clarify my earlier comments. When I said, I'd be okay with sticking with the Zoom, I don't want to appear that I'm ambivalent. I actually prefer Zoom, but I can go either way. But given our experience when we had a meeting in the gym, even if we're live and we still have to wear masks, or anyone else has to wear masks, I think, that's making it less than an efficient or less than an optimum situation. And quite honestly, I don't want to be in the room unless I have some assurance that everybody else in there has been vaccinated. So, you got those kind of things to deal with as well. So again, I just want to be clear that right now, given the world situation, I do prefer remote. I'm willing to go back if that's what the group does, but we don't need to do it and then put ourselves in a position where we are jeopardizing one another and somebody still has to wear a mask. And then we talk about the audio issues. It's just going to suck if we still have to wear masks, and which ought to be a requirement unless we have guarantees that everybody has been vaccinated. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Okay, so we, kind of ended up combining the two agenda items, which I think is fine. All right, go ahead, Lisa.
I know that we're running late on time, but I do want to say that on one hand, it seems enticing to be able to ask for people for proof of vaccination or ask people if they're vaccinated, but we must not. We must not do that. It's a violation of medical privacy. It also creates a very concerning sort of caste system. And so no matter how much that seems to expedite some of these things, we must not ask. Thank you.
I wholeheartedly agree.
I have a comment on that.
Okay, go ahead, Laura.
Our current ordinance has an exemption for people with medical conditions. Okay, so we've been having to do this for months now. That police are in a position, if somebody says, well, I'm just going to make something up, asthma. I don't know what conditions would prevent somebody from having a mask. So that's not a reason.
Yeah, well, let's get it right this time. We can't ask.
Well, then somebody says, I don't have to wear one. We just take that. Yeah, then that's that.
Thank you, CDC.
Yeah. Okay, so a lot of good feedback. Brianne, I want to clarify a question or clarify something you said, and then I want to kind of feedback some things that I've heard and see what the thoughts are. So Brianne, did you say if we do nothing that our restrictions go away or our protocols go away on June 2nd?
Yes, all of our legislation is premised on the village's declaration of emergency, and that's why we included the text of that resolution, because it specifically says until the state of emergency as declared by the governor expires. So the village can do nothing, and if the state emergency expires, the village emergency expires, unless council acts to declare a new one, modify the state of emergency, or do something else. It will expire concurrent with the state's declaration of emergency.
Okay, thanks, Brianne. Okay, so I'm gonna now go back to bifurcating the two issues. And so based on everything I've heard, and any council member correct me if I misheard, it sounds like basically we are looking at maybe two issues. One of those is we want to support businesses that still want to require masks, and Chief Carlson has said that they will do that. And that, I mean, is in line with everything that's been put out there. Unfortunately, you know, this is again being put back on businesses and local governments, but it seems that we're all in agreement that we will let these other restrictions expire, and that we will support businesses that want to continue requiring their patrons to wear masks. So that's the first thing I'm hearing. I think on a related note, I appreciate that Kate brought up the busker street vendor situation. And I would suggest that that is something that we address at our next meeting and not delve into that right now. I'm going to anticipate that that's not going to be a problem in the next 2 weeks, but I mean, that's hard to say. So.
And I'd like to work on that, Brian.
Great, great.
I would too, because that's in the category of casual outdoor contact.
Sure, sure. Okay. So then the second thing that I'm hearing is that in general, there's support for council, which is all vaccinated, to be in person. But there are a couple things that I think are really important that came up. One is the gym is not an option. It is a terrible venue. I've watched the one BZA meeting where we tried to do it in the gym. So anybody that thinks that's a good venue for a public meeting, and there was also the recent school meeting, it's not. The second thing that I feel that we have to accommodate is the hybrid approach. And I understand Josue and I have talked about this a lot, that there are some challenges, but I'm involved in enough meetings with all my other hats to know that we can make hybrid work. And I don't want to lose the participation that we've achieved with that. So I think we've got to figure that out. And then the third thing, kind of responding to what Kevin brought up, is I would recommend in the short term that council is in chambers, and folks that want to make comments in person, we will start with rooms A and B, and we've already set that up. And so I think that helps balance concerns about whether people are vaccinated or not. And then I think we can start to move into, you know, maybe if someone needs to be in front of us, we have that one person at a time come into council chambers. But I feel like we can evolve that over the next month or two. But what I've heard indicates to me that we should, for everyone that's comfortable with being in person, pilot that on June 7th with some of these, I guess, accommodations. So if there is a council member that would prefer to be on Zoom, or members, they should be able to do that. And again, I think we slowly move into everybody being in the same room. So I guess that's kind of what I've heard. That's what I'm going to throw back. And I welcome from council members any comments about that.
Brian, just a couple of quick things. So we don't know yet what the Attorney General is going to tell us about in-person versus Zoom public meetings. You know, my guess is the Attorney General's going to say we have to meet in person, that this exception for Zoom is not going to be allowed anymore. So Brianne will keep track of that, but that may happen. Secondly, I am not that comfortable being in person if I have to wear a mask.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I should have said that. Like, to me, part of it is that we don't have to wear masks. Yeah.
And by the way, the Greene County Health Department, I have it right here, their May 14th guidance, I'll quote, interim public health recommendations have been updated stating that fully vaccinated people no longer need to wear a mask or physically distance in any setting. So that is out there at the Greene County level too.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of our Greene County elected officials had COVID just 2 weeks ago, but anyway. Okay, so any other comments, thoughts from council members?
Brian?
Yes.
I just have a clarifying question, I guess. Given that I think we have agreed that we want to support businesses that want to continue to have their patrons and workers wear masks, when the June 2nd deadline comes, then is there going to be this space between when anything we can do comes back into effect, or I'm not clear about that.
So I think this falls under the, private businesses can, make decisions about how they operate those businesses. And Chief Carlson indicated that our peace officers will support them in that regard. So I don't think there's a gap. Okay. Anything else?
I would just follow up on Laura's comment. As far as the Attorney General's office, we will probably get some guidance on open meetings and in person, but I would just also remind council in the memo that I included in the packet, the Ohio Municipal League was pushing really hard to make hybrid and remote meetings a permanent option for municipalities. And you've exercised your home rule power to say that it is an option when you have any local, state, or federal emergency that prohibits or restricts the size of in-person gatherings. So if we try this on June 7th, we go to the next meeting in June, and as Lisa predicted, there's some sort of spike, or, we can't tell what the future will hold. But if based on available data, council says, you know what, we need to go back to meeting remotely and we're going to declare an emergency because of the data, then you have the ability to do that under the revised village code.
Okay, thanks for that, Brianne. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up this conversation, and I feel like we've provided the clarity that everyone asked for. I hope that people feel like that, and Megan can talk to me afterwards if it's not clear. Otherwise, I will work with Josue and the team to represent council's interests in this regard, as well as our citizens, and I appreciate the input. So we have a couple more items, which I think will be fairly short. I think as far as and I think this is misstated on the agenda, but I believe that this letter is to the Greene County Commissioners. So we have that letter in the packet. I'm ready to sign unless there are any concerns from council about that. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I think we can move on. And then Josue, this is our building department discussion, so I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Brian. I'm sharing a presentation, and I'm going to be as brief as I can on this. So, all right, certifying the Yellow Springs for a building department. I think that this is an economic development imperative. Why? Well, I think you are familiar with some of the challenges of the Greene County Building Department. Long delays, poor engagement, and feedback from the county staff, which restricts and discourages economic development. And as you all know, we've got major economic development projects underway or on the horizon for Yellow Springs. And I don't think that we can afford the restriction or discouragement of key economic development activities. So what's the solution? certify Yellow Springs as a building department. This is something that we used to have. We used to run our own building department, had our own plan review and inspections. And some time ago, the village decided to outsource that and give all that right to the county. But we can do it ourselves. So what does it mean? We certify a building department that would allow the village to exercise its home rule power and manage its own building department. This would improve the permit process for Yellow Springs residents and businesses. We would contract these services out for plan review and inspections. And at some point, it is possible that we could have the numbers that would justify having staff in-house to be able to manage it in-house. But there are plenty of providers. There's Safe Build, NIC, and a few other jurisdiction or municipal partners that provide this service like Greene County does for us. It is also possible that once we are certified that we could outsource it right back to Greene County. So in essence, by us, there's nothing that we lose by certifying Yellow Springs as a building department. We can always use Greene County Building Department for as needed services. So I think that this is just a sound practice for us to get our own certified building department by the state. An effective building department is key to economic development. It's everywhere. So it's important. So what are the permit numbers? What kind of size or volume we talking about? Here are the charts. You can see a breakdown of fees that the county collected by year. The 2021 is partial data because we don't have all the data. They didn't have it all compiled, and obviously we're still in 2021. So, but those are the numbers. The year with the most permits were in 2014, a yield of 47,000. That's out of total of 177 permits. And the second highest year was 2018 with $43,361 in fees out of 192 permits. So there's some averages there. So this gives you an idea of how much activity we're talking about. So key question you may have, well, what other small villages are doing this? Is this even possible? And I have a story to tell you. West Jefferson, a small village with a population similar to our size, 4,200, is doing this, and they are serving 59,610 residents. Little old West Jefferson is doing building inspections, building department services for the village of West Jefferson, Plain City, Mount Sterling, City of London, Madison, and Madison County residential properties. Jefferson faced a similar challenge that we're facing. They have key economic development goals, and their partner was just not doing it for them. So they took it upon themselves and are getting it done themselves. So what's next for us? Develop partnerships for building official and inspection team. We can outsource this. We will need to put a team in place. Council, we need to pass ordinances for residential and commercial plan review and inspection. We will need to apply certification from the state of Ohio, set permit fee schedule, which is something that council would do, and implement technology for the permit management. We're a step ahead of this already since we invested in the iWorks technology platform, and this same technology can manage permits through the entire process, through the submission, review, and authorization. And I think I sped through that presentation, Brian.
Thank you, Josue. So I think rather than have discussion or questions, I would just like to hear from council. Have they heard enough to bring this back for discussion and a decision? So I see a nod from Mary Ann, from Lisa, from Kevin, from Laura. So, all right, so we'll bring it back. Laura, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it's like one more, I'm all for it. It's one more example of, taxpayers pay Greene County to provide a service that now we're saying we're not that happy with, but we don't get any of our money back to help run it, so that's frustrating. But maybe, if the permit fees get pretty close, and as Josue said, if we're going to have a bump in economic development and we need to service people better than they feel they're being served, but if we get slow again, maybe we go back to Greene County. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And we can certainly evaluate as we go. Yeah. All right, so Josue, I think you've heard that you can bring this back.
That's a green light. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. So as far as the manager's report, I guess I would just ask if anyone has any questions for Josue, they can ask those. Otherwise, we'll.
Brian, I do have one key thing. If you're going to get out anything out of this manager's report, we got a grant for stormwater rerouting along Dayton Street. So that is a big plus. Johnny, Denise, and the team just really done a great job of solving a problem that we've known has been a problem since the 1960s. So we're getting it done. The team is getting it done, and we're really proud to move that forward. And that's going to require us to sort of expedite that project this year. So you'll be hearing a lot more of it. Bob Baldwin, if you're watching, I know you will be proud because it's something that you asked me on my first week on the job. So we're getting done.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, Josue. You guys are rocking the grants. We appreciate it. Great work. All right, boards and commissions. Any highlights there? Okay, future agenda items. Anything that anyone wants to highlight?
Brian, I have something that I hope will come in the next month, and that's a proposal for the creation of a citizen review board. It's still going through the process, but just want to put that out there.
Okay, great.
And Brian, just in case we need it, in case we need an emergency meeting around this COVID stuff, I just want to point out that Josue has a town hall on the Dora on May 26th. That's at 7 o'clock. Maybe if we had to have an emergency meeting, it could be at 6 on that day.
Great, thank you.
Brian, I would offer that if with an emergency basis, we already have that time slot reserved and audience are tuning in. So we could start that council meeting at that 7 o'clock to, capture the audience that we already have watching. So just an idea.
Okay, great. Anything else?
Maybe you could use that opportunity to gather business input before that June 7th meeting. I've got your proposal to add council to insurance coming back resolution for the support of climate sustainability actions. You wanted to discuss the Busker street vendor situation, decision about the building department. And then do you want, well, some other stuff we'll figure out during agenda planning that's already clumped in future agenda items.
Great.
Judy and Brian, this is Kevin. So the Juneteenth planning is coming along. I anticipate there being a request for funds. There was one that was halted. So we'll meet this week. And I would suggest that probably if there is identified funding concerns, that I would come before council at our next meeting asking for those funds.
Okay. And I know we already have $500 allocated. Is that correct?
Right. Correct. Thank you, Lisa Krieger.
Great. Anything else?
Yes, Brian. I had wanted to make a report for the Yellow Springs Development Corporation and to ask council if they would like to have input into any of the directions. And so I would like to have that on the next agenda. And I don't know if that would be under we can decide at agenda planning where to put it.
That sounds good. Thank you. Any other items? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn then.
I move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thanks everyone. Great meeting, great discussions.
Thank
you. Have a good night.
All right.
Good night.
Hi, everyone.
Good night.